Okay, I think we can get going. For those of you who do not know me, I am Pam Werner, and I work at the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and I lead up the Peer Specialist and Recovery Coach initiative. Many times I call it a movement because I do believe that peers transform systems, and I really liked what Justin said today. I believe it resonated with quite a few of us, and I'm looking forward to sharing about the Peer Warmline and talking about the grant and how it started and how it was a result of COVID. You're Mary Beth, you're
I was just gonna say that I'm making sure I'm not on mute. Um, Sorry about that. Um, and my name is Mary Beth Franks, and I am the Michigan Peer Warmline manager. And I'm looking forward to getting to know you guys, talking to you guys a little bit about the Warmline, what it entails, what we do, um, how it became, um, all that good stuff. So we're excited about meeting with you guys today. I'm going to have Pam start us off. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Oh, nope, didn't work that time. See, sorry about that. Can you see that now, Pam?
I can
Everybody?
see it. It just needs to go to slideshow. Yep.
Got it. Got it.
Yes, perfect.
All right. So I will go ahead and get that going.
So we want to start out just by covering what is a warm line. I imagine most of you know what a warm line is, but I pulled some of this information straight out of the grant we wrote and also on national websites. So it's a phone number or electronic means, which would be text messaging. The warm line isn't doing that yet, but that is a plan for in the future. And it's so people can access peer support. People communicate, individuals that call communicate with people who have a lived experience of behavioral health trauma and or personal crises. And warm lines started many years ago. We actually had a few in Michigan that were run by volunteers, and they were grant funded. But the hard part is sustaining a warm line. So they are an alternative to psychiatric crisis hotlines, alleviate the burden on crisis responders by offering a solution for people who are calling that aren't in a crisis. So across the nation, warm lines are operated by trained peer specialists who offer hope and knowledge gained from their own experience with recovery. And this is where you can find a list of all the warm lines in the country. Not every state has a warm line. Some states, it may be only in a specific region, but there's a person, Howard Trackman, and he keeps up on all of this and sends out emails to make sure everything is up to date. And I noticed when I went to pull the website up, there was changes that just happened a week or two ago. So if you want to write that down, that's fine. And Mary Beth and I did talk about our presentation styles. So we really believe that this is interactive. So if you have a question and you want to raise your hand, we'll look for that, and feel free to stop and ask us questions or make comments if you'd like.
Yeah, during versus after, so that way we can. Yeah, that'd be great.
Mhm.
Side note of this slide with the warmline.org is that when you go to this website, they do have, like Pam said, a list of the warm lines that are available. The ones that are listed in red are ones that take calls. Sorry, from outside of the state of Michigan, and they give their hours of operations and days of operations. It's like Pam said in the beginning, some of the warm lines throughout the nation are volunteer based, so they have different hours and are not 24/7. So it's kind of a neat. It's got a lot of articles and other things on it, so it's a neat resource and tool to not only learn more about different warm lines throughout the nation, but about ours, and it has different articles, so it's kind of neat. So yeah, check that one out.
So the Michigan Peer Warmline, an interesting start to it. So when COVID hit, we were getting ready to do several trainings at facilities, retreat centers, and all of a sudden everything stopped. We were as state employees instructed that we weren't to come in tomorrow, the next day, and we were really struggling with what do we do from going to face-to-face online and then moving to Zoom. I was at home and we had the opportunity to work the state of Michigan lines. There was a email that people could write and ask about executive orders and talk to people. There was a phone line. So I started doing that work during the day and in the evenings and on the weekends. And I kept thinking, what are the people that we exist for? What are they doing? Because we knew programs were shutting down, drop-ins were not able to have people in. And so I just got thinking, we need a warm line. And so I ended up writing a grant with University of Michigan and Justice and Mental Health Organization and was able to get that funded within 4 hours. It got approved through our highest levels and it happened that fast. We did have the money in the department through our Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration Adult Mental Health Block Grant funding. So with our collaborators, which was the department, behavioral health area, JMHO, University of Michigan, we were able to start on April 13th. So we were able to get the funding, and then 2 weeks later, we're able to start and pick up some phone calls and talk to people across the state. Initially, the people that were calling were, they use this word, Mary Beth and I aren't real fans of it, but were Michiganders. So it was individuals that came from all different areas, some teachers. There were some individuals, moms trying to figure out how to work full time and educate their children when their schools were closed. Lots of different things were happening, quite a bit of stress that was going on. And in the meantime, our governor, Gretchen Whitmer, when she was giving her press announcements every day, she put the warm line number at the very bottom. And there was no way that we had adequate staffing for the number of calls that would come in during that press conference. And we had no idea that that was going to happen. It did slow down quite a bit and helped out a lot when they didn't run it every single day and it was only out there once a week. So the warm line is staffed by certified peer support specialists. All of these individuals are from Michigan, and or certified peer recovery coaches. It's not specific to mental health or substance use. It is for anyone that resides in our state.
Cynthia had a Mo, I like yours, by the way. Mo put, I don't even know how to pronounce that. How do you say that?
Michelanders.
Something like that. Yeah, thank you. And in the chat, Cynthia put she tried to call into it for the first time last week. We are having many family crisis over here. However, I did not get through and asked if I wanted someone to call me back the next day. I thought it was always supposed to be answered when we were on with JMHO. I do not know the way that Common Ground does things. Anyways, I'm sorting things out and worked things out myself that day. Just to address that, we are actually the call volume has, I apologize for that, but the call volume has bumped up dramatically. With still we are, which is later on in the slides, but with a limited staff, we are growing. And also, updating our phone system a lot. I'm really excited about the fact that we have more and more responders on and more calls coming in. We used to be able to take calls and have like a 45-minute break or something like that. Now it's like we have back-to-back calls. So apologize for that, but we do when we can, and then again it takes up to the next day. If you do leave a message with your name and phone number, we do call you back as soon as we get off the phone with whoever we're on the phone with. We call you back right away. So again, I'm glad things worked out for you though, Cynthia. Glad you're here.
It's always good to also call back if you have the ability to, because yes, the calls have dramatically increased.
Yeah.
And funding, I think we're getting into the funding next, provided through legislative order, has only so many positions that are allocated. So hopefully that will go up. So initially, we contracted with the Justice and Mental Health Organization for staffing and operations. And Cynthia was one of our peer responders that worked with Jim Ho during the whole operation of the Warmline until it transitioned in May of 2021 to Common Ground. So the Warmline initially, the funding came from SAMHSA, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and it came in the way of a block grant. So it was not sustainable. It would have been able to continue for a year or two, but that's one thing that many Warmlines struggle with across the country is the whole sustainability. So Common Ground at that time and currently has a contract to run the Michigan Crisis and Access Line. And it was always part of the transition and part of the vision that the Warmline would become part of that. And it would work together where you'd have a crisis and an access line all under a same umbrella, working together in partnership. So right now the staffing is 25 peer Warmline specialists, also called responders. There are 4 peer supervisors, and Mary Beth is the peer manager. The Warmline is part of the National Warmline Group that meets once a month, and there's Warmlines that share some of their best practices, talk a lot about what some of the things are that they're experiencing, and also looking at how do Warmlines work with 988. We did not put that information in to really talk about 988, but there is Warmlines in some states that will work with 988. They're not, as I'd say, developed as Michigan, where they're rolled into one program for both crisis and Warmlines. So the Warmline is fully integrated into the operation of MyCal, Michigan Crisis and Access Line. That's also a website, MyCal, and it's on the michigan.gov website. And I'll put that in the chat once Mary Beth starts her part of the presentation. So in 2018, there was the CARES initiative and a task force, which stands for Community Access, Resources, Education, and Safety. So Michigan legislators have been very interested in behavioral health. And more funding is getting put into that. The governor has added quite a bit of funding in behavioral health for the next few fiscal years. So Michigan legislators were really concerned that people were confused about the current system and they didn't know where to go to get help with the crisis. MyCal then became law, and it was it's Public Act 12 of 2020 to meet the need. So it's funded by both state and federal dollars. So in 2020, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services spent quite a few hours working with people with lived experience. Mary Beth was part of that. Law enforcement, community mental health services programs, and emergency departments to develop MyCal. Now, Mary Beth, do you want to add anything about all the work that that committee did that you were on?
Just a lot of a lot of research to see like where the gaps in services were, especially with COVID. Um, People weren't being able to for a good example is community mental health centers and drop-ins and clubhouses were shut down. Um, so how did that affect people? Were they homebound to where that was their only source of support um, or integration and getting out into the community? What and then when COVID happened, it was shut down. So how did that affect them? Um, a lot of different just a lot of different research with a lot of different people throughout the entire state of Michigan. Um, and did the numbers of police interaction increase, or emergency room visits, just different things like that. All the research that went into it was um, driven by peers like we are, based on our experience, like what were our needs and how could our needs be met with this pandemic that was going on. So, um, yeah, a lot of research, a lot of personal knowledge, even personal experience, even myself. Like I would sit on these committees and I would become very passionate about like how I felt with regards to how my treatment was, affected my kids, my mother, just different people in my own personal, life. So they took into account all of that to sustain to grow and figure out like how to best support throughout the pandemic and now continuing.
And I know from a lot of those, I was not on those committee meetings, but people who had lived experience that were shared with me that it was really important that people listened to their voice, and especially law enforcement. There were also family groups that were on there that really came from a different perspective, that were not about people who used and received services or peers. And so that collaborative effort really made a difference in how MyCal was developed.
Definitely. And you know, we are one of the very lucky because I do sit on national committees for warm lines. They look to Michigan as a role model because we do actually have we have MyCal, we have the actual crisis line that we are connected to, and so that's been a huge asset. We are, although we understand crisis, obviously. It's been a great resource to be able to, if somebody calls into the warm line, be able to utilize the MyCal crisis line to then get them the services and supports they need right then and there. Um, so I'm a personal experience again. If I've tried to call, say like I've had a bad situation and I try to reach out to the national lines for the helplines, and maybe they'll have you on hold for 5 or 10 minutes. The cool thing about us is if you call us and we have a more intense service that is needed, we can then reach out to that to our MyCal line, um, and then do what we call a warm transfer. So what the warm transfer does is we go with the caller that calls us because you've been on the phone with us and talking to us as a peer over with you to the crisis line, to then explain what's going on, help you through that situation with the crisis worker. So it's a pretty neat resource to have. Um, Speaking of that, that kind of brings me to my next slide. Um, so there is a difference. There's a difference between what MyCal provides and what the Peer Warmline provides. And like Pam said, MyCal is the program as a whole, and we're comprised of three different programs actually. Um, and so MyCal being one of them, the Michigan Crisis and Access Line, the Peer Warmline, which is what we're talking about today, and then we also have something that's starting fairly soon, and it is a first responders line. So that's going to be exciting too, but that's part of the MyCal program. Um, and so the difference between MyCal and then the warm line is that MyCal provides immediate intervention for those that are in distress or crisis situations. I was asked the other day in a national meeting, like, how do you define a crisis? And that is very different. It's, as we know, it's tailored to every single person. Um, so that is why we are honored to be a part of the MyCal program because we do have MyCal available 24/7. Um, they are open um, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, holidays, all that, and they provide crisis supports and risk level assessments.
I can't see
Um,
anybody
they
having
also provide
training that's all day training. Shop.
peer coordination,
That's great.
referrals, and follow-ups if needed.
Okay.
Um, the warm line currently, we're not case managers, we are peers, so we don't provide, the care coordination. We can give out resources if requested, um, but we don't provide that like follow-up. We don't make those calls back. We are like strictly an emotional support, which we will get to in just a moment. Um, But then the difference is that, the warm line provides that early intervention with that emotional support that sometimes a lot of the times can prevent a crisis from occurring. Um, we are available from 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. That is our days for the day. We have 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Our day consists of 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. Um, we are always anonymous. We are staffed by certified peer support specialists and certified peer recovery coaches. Um, we are a centralized state-wide warm line that provides the early intervention with emotional support. We try to prevent by providing that emotional support a crisis, or we put this in to talk about because sometimes it's a costly 911 call. Some of us have I myself have personal experience with that, or even emergency room visits. Um, again, it's anonymous. There's the hours 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. 7 days a week, and we have lived experience of behavioral health issues. We have that personal trauma, we have that lived experience and that personal crisis experience, which makes it kind of nice to be able to relate to our callers, and let them know that like we are your peer. We've been there. We've experienced those similar situations. So this is a little bit about who calls the warm line. We serve people from all walks of life. We cover people. We talk to people without insurance and with insurance. I had somebody call not too long ago and say, like, I make a lot of money. That was the first thing out of their mouth, and it kind of broke my heart a little. Make a lot of money. Am I still eligible to make this phone call? Yes, we don't look at that. We don't care about the money aspect. We are providing the service to anybody who is in Michigan who are 18 years of age or older, elderly, first responders, anybody's eligible that's 18 years of older. Um, where are they in the continuum of care? They may be a first time caller. They may be the first time they've experienced anxiety, depression. They might have some suicidal ideations. And our staff is wonderful because we're all trained on the difference between, and we all know this, the difference between having those suicidal ideations and plans, which is an awesome part about our call volumes and everything is that people just call sometimes to do four square breathing, where we walk them through how to they hear our voice telling them how to breathe. um, could be that they're depressed over a situation that's going on, it's a temporary situation, um, panic attacks, those kinds of things. It's an awesome thing that they call and they're like, thank you, I feel so much better just hearing somebody talk to me, or just to listen. um, they may be the recipients of mental health or substance use services in the private or public sector. Again, we don't charge for the service. It is a free service for anybody in the state of Michigan. And it's kind of nice to be able to provide that without, having to worry about is there a cost associated with that. Um, we hear both things. We hear when COVID hit and the warm line opened, we heard both things. We heard that private therapists would stay open and do Zoom meetings, but it's kind of like a different feel than the in person. Um, and then the public sector, same thing with the CMHs and the drop-ins and clubhouses shutting down. Um, and then sometimes they just want someone to listen. A lot of our callers will use their call just to talk the entire time, and that's okay. It's we're meeting them where they're at and to provide whatever emotional support they need, even if that is just sitting there to listen for the entire call. Um, and what do they seek? I put this in here 3 times. The emotional support is the huge part. Emotional support, it could be due to a chronic mental health concern, could be to substance use. We have a lot of people that call and tell us their stories, and they've just never been comfortable or they've been stigmatized in telling their story. Hearing us tell them different pieces of our story makes them feel better about the fact that, hey, we're okay. Like there's other people that are like us, and it just takes like a weight off their shoulder sometime. Um, Substance use, we have a lot of callers that talk about why. And we have callers that will say, like, I enjoy using substances, and we'll get into detail about that. And that's okay because we're meeting them where they're at. We're not going to tell them that they're wrong for using substances. We're not going to tell them to stop using the substance. We're going to listen to them and see what, what they have to say, and just provide again that emotional assistance and support. Physical health issues. We've had a lot of callers talk about, their physical health. It might be related to COVID, it might not, but just being able to again talk through those kinds of things. So and again, we have a lot of callers that this is the first time they've ever experienced any mental health substances or many mental health issues or substance use issues, and they just want someone to listen to them. Like, what do I expect? What's CMH like? How do I look for a therapist? How did you look for a therapist? Those kinds of questions. And then navigating the system. I mean, I remember what it was like trying to navigate the system. Both in the public and the private sector. It's still scary. There's so many like, how do I do this? What do I do? What's my first, So having them, not us, come up with a plan. And again, based off of listening to them and where they're at and their needs. Chantel, I agree. Listening is huge. People get advice, and that's one thing that we don't provide. I will say that we don't provide advice on the warm line. We don't provide that because what if the advice is wrong for them? It's completely different for every single person. So I love that you brought that up, and thank you. And sometimes we do just need a listening ear, and that's what we're here for. So this is part of what, as the Peer Warmline manager, these are some of our Peer Warmline competencies. So you have to be a certified peer support specialist or have a dual certification as a recovery coach with no less than 1 year paid experience. The reason we do that is because it is important that we have so many different trainings available to us as peers that MDHHS continues to give us for that continuing education. We want to know that, like, it's not just a, hey, I went through the training, got my certificate, I'm a peer, but I'm done. It's, we want to know that you are passionate about it, that you really want to work taking calls from people, because taking calls is a little bit different than meeting people right in person. So that is one of our competencies. And then also being grounded in our own recovery and being able to utilize our own recovery experiences to support others through their journey, no matter where they're at. Um, I always say that it, like, and I know that everybody's heard this before, but planting seeds of hope. When a caller calls us, they might, the first call, just have their whole 20 minutes of nothing but like telling you what's going on, because we take 20-minute calls, which we'll get into in a minute too. Um, but they might spend their whole 20 minutes talking about what's going on. And then they call back and they say, I just called and I just want to say I got I felt really good to talk. But now I want to talk about like how I'm feeling or something. And then we go through our own experiences to a limited degree to say like, like I've been depressed before too. And these are some of the coping skills that I used. We offer those. And then it shows them that we've had the same experience or similar experiences, and just really want to help support as best as we can. Um, because the warm line is still, I stay fairly new, because we did we're evolving. We're getting bigger every single day. Um, Being adaptable to regular changes with the evolution of the program is like a huge thing. I even talk about that in the interviews when somebody comes to interview for the warm line, as a warm line specialist position, is that you, being adaptable to those changes is huge. Our program is growing so fast, and it's so amazing that having to be adaptable to any changes that come along because of those best practices, national best practices. There might be something that pops up that is a better way to do things, and we're learning every single day. Um, so peer warmline specialists attend warmline orientation training to be proficient in our core values and competencies, what we expect on our line. Ethics and practice, like we are very strong with ethics and boundaries in our calls. It's hard. It's hard as a peer, and we all know this as peers. Ethics and boundaries can be hard because sometimes we really do, well, we're human, I mean, we feel like how they're feeling, and you know, we have been through a lot ourselves. So our ethics and practice is important. 20-minute call times is really important because well, we'll talk about that too. But we do two 20-minute calls and throughout the day, which is the 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. Um, and I think, Mo, do they send the okay? Do they send the warm line presentation out? I think, Pam, it goes on the yeah, the website. Yep. Okay. Thank you. Um, so we do provide, we're making sure that our warm line specialists are proficient in the 20-minute call times, that they're proficient in trauma informed care and effective self disclosure. It's important because, you know, we do only have 20 minutes with a caller that we do have to stick to because we are growing. But in those 20 minutes, a lot can be accomplished, a very lot. Um, Another thing that we do is we make sure that it is in our handbook, even that we follow our MDHHS, CPSS code of ethics, or if you are duly certified, or some people even have the MDHHS, they're triply certified as a community health worker, that we follow those code of ethics as well. It's very important that we uphold that as peers in any aspect that we have throughout our job history with regards to being a peer, is to follow those ethics. Um, Understanding the phone functionality and navigation is huge, because it's, you know, our phone system is also evolving over time. As we grow, the phone system grows, and it's kind of a neat resource and tool. And I go through, as the manager, I go through, I don't know how many meetings per week about the phone systems to make sure that they are running adequately, that there's no flaws. If there's little bugs, that they find them right away, so that way we're constantly evolving and growing, so that they're addressed right away versus later. Um, so that's another competency, is understanding the phone functions and navigations of the phones. Um, Communicating with the shift supervisors regularly. We have shift supervisors on, and so the peer warmline specialists have them as a tool and as a resource for not only themselves but the callers. Um, they they receive and provide support, our warm line specialists. So we do end of call. If you have a hard call, they take a hard call, and it might, you know, it might, you know, trigger some feels, you know, and so we provide that debriefing after a call. We do focus on the warm line specialist and make sure that they're okay after the call. If they reach out and they've had a hard call that they need to just kind of talk about. Um, and make sure that they're okay, doing okay. And then we also provide the shift supervisors also provide end of shift debriefing as an option. So that way it's kind of neat, because sometimes we do get those hard calls, and they do hit home. It might be with our own personal recovery journey, or with somebody that's very meaningful in our lives. So they provide that support at the end of shift too. Um, how was your shift? Is there anything that you need help with? Is there anything you could have changed, or anything you need me to support you with? Because they don't want, I mean, we work from home, but they don't want us to take any, you know, undue feelings or anything like that home with us. So it's kind of neat to have that available too. And our shift supervisors are all peers as well. We're all peers. Um, so utilizing de-escalation techniques to and strength-based approaches to support individuals served. Again, making sure that we meet the callers where they're at, not pushing recovery on somebody, not pushing. We talked about AA, You know, he in the keynote speaker this morning, that worked for him. It might work for me too, but it might not work for the caller. So like not pushing those things on callers, and like just meeting them where they're at, to support their needs. And then at all times we maintain a high level of confidentiality while providing and performing services. We highly respect people that call, and it's anonymous, and we want to make sure that, you know, your confidentiality is kept to the and held to the utmost respect. Um, so these are some core principles that guide our work as peer warmline specialists and supervisors, and myself as the manager, is that we do the most good. we try to do the right thing. We use our abilities and skills solely for the recovery and well-being of the individuals that are calling the warm line. We do no harm. We develop and provide a safe and secure atmosphere and environment for the callers. Again, not pushing our beliefs or personal biases onto other callers. Um, we focus on the individual. We respect and encourage the individual's right to choose their own path in life, regardless of our personal feelings about that path. Um, be fair and be just. We don't discriminate or stigmatize against people that we serve. Um, tell the truth. We don't make false promises we cannot keep. And again, I'm looking at the chat. Chantel, this kind of brings me to yours. How do you handle someone calling for advice, wanting treatment, and not sure where to start? Um, what we do is we would talk to the caller and let them know that we are there to support them. We can let them know, like, if it's we that's what we do. Part of sharing our story is telling them, like, well, I can tell you how I started services if they're not sure where to start. And you can say it might not work for you, but this is what I've tried with coping skills, those kinds of things. um, and then also we provide, if asked, we could provide a number to like a local community mental health so that they can call them and ask them the questions that they want answered specifically about their area, because different areas do different things. um, but if someone calls in and says, like, hey, Mary Beth, I need your advice. What we do is we are specifically trained to tell the caller, well, I know what I would do, but I want to hear what you would do. Has something like this happened to you in the past? And how did you work through that? And it basically, the callers a lot of the times just need to hear that question or those types of things. And then they're like, they solve their own. That's where they come up with their own action plans and stuff like that. So it's kind of neat. Um, so that's how we do that, Chantel. Um, so privacy and confidentiality again, we respect the individual's right to control information about themselves. We do not share information about individuals with other agencies, programs, family, or friends without consent. And even then, it's in a rare occasion. Um, we have a couple callers that call like husband and wife, or mother daughter, mother son, father daughter, father son. um, we have to ask that caller on the phone, is it okay if we continue this call, knowing that like their daughter or their son or whoever is on the phone with them? So making sure that that's okay. And because we do respect privacy and confidentiality at the utmost. um, and we aim to provide acceptance, genuineness, and empathy for all of our callers. This is really important to me and to the entire staff of the Warmline Specialist, is that we are strengths focused. We see what is strong and and not what is wrong. Um, it's really important to keep this in mind, because sometimes we have callers that call and they just have like a lot of negativity going on in their life and they don't know where to start. They haven't been given that seed of hope. It hasn't been planted, so we encourage them to identify their own strengths and to use those strengths and then build on those strengths. Um, again, we use effective self disclosure to role model the use of our own strengths and our own recovery when appropriate. Um, we encourage the callers to explore their own dreams and their own goals, what's meaningful to them. Um, if somebody calls and they have no way of looking positive at all, everything that's happened to them is negative right now. They feel like everything is negative. It might be just one small thing. One time we had a caller that was like crying the entire time, and I heard a cat meow in the background. So I asked her about her cat, and let me tell you, that changed the whole dynamic of the conversation. She started talking about her dreams and her goals in her life, and that just really impacted her, to be able to share about some strengths that she forgot about because she was in a lower spot in her life. So it's really neat. Um, and we do point out to our callers how their strengths that they're building upon, that they're starting to focus on, are a foundation of recovery. And in how it's nonlinear, and we go up and down, but every day is a new start. Um, and we do empower our callers to problem solve and resolve conflicts of their own. We don't do that for them. So why 20 minutes? 20 minutes provides a brief yet empowering source of support. When asked, we provide resources and community supports we don't provide that at the beginning of a call. Like, hey, you want some resources? No, we wait for them to ask for those resources, or do you know of any resources? And then we can look those up for them. Um, and then it's really important because it's peer support versus therapy. I mean, I've been in front of a therapist before, and I don't know about you guys, but the therapist is not going to tell me their life. They're not going to tell me anything about their story. I'm a peer. I'm going to tell you about my story. So the 20-minute call also sets a boundary to where we are providing that brief, empowering source of support, peer support versus therapy. 20-minute call is a national best practice, and it is our policy that we follow. So we do have to follow policies just like everyone else, and because it is a national best practice, it has become one of our policies. This is also one of my favorite slides. It sums up a lot about the warm line. It's called Wait, Why Am I Talking? It's easy on the warm line just to freestyle a conversation and have freestyle conversations with the caller that calls in. And there is a place for that. But when it comes to our jobs in that 20-minute as just a warm line responder to provide that emotional support, 90% of our calls are just listening. The other 10% is providing that emotional support or resources or whatever it is that they're asking for in a limit, as best as we can. But 90% of our job is just listening. The other 10% is strictly emotional support. So we use this acronym quite a bit. Wait, why am I talking? This ties into that because when you listen with complete attention to a caller, you're saying, hey, guess what? You're important. And we appreciate you calling. Sometimes the only positive thing that we can not through their stories that they've told us in that 20 minutes is letting them know that, it must have taken a lot of courage to call today. And we're very proud of you for calling because, we're here to provide that emotional support, and listening is part of emotional support. So listening to them, the whole 20-minute call, we are focused on them. We're not multitasking, doing other things. We're focusing on the caller. And again, this is the last slide, if you know someone that's in need, or you yourself want to call and reach out to us, this is our number. And we, again, are open 10 a.m. to 2 a.m., 7 days a week, 365 days a year, holidays, we're open. And we really appreciate being able to provide that assistance based off of our own experiences, and be able to do it from from home in a virtual way, over the phone. So I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing and ask if there's any questions. I don't think we really need to. I don't know how this one works. Can they unmute and just ask questions, or?
I
don't
just
know, can you hear
asked,
me?
yes.
Yeah, yep, you can.
Okay, hi, this is Matt from Oakland County.
Hi, Matt.
Hi, I'm a peer mentor for Oakland County. So I'm kind of at a other role of the physical disability side. And I had a friend who I had to call for the warm line because she was having some mental illness crisis at the time. So I recommended her to call you guys, but I also got her resources from you guys. But the resources that they gave me kind of felt blah. And I just wanted to make that aware that, like, it was the Lansing area was where I was asking for the resources from. And being from Oakland County, I'm not gonna know all the resources of Lansing.
Okay.
So I kind of feel like they're just like, I remember one of the things that they said, well, just call the mental health near CMH. And I'm like, okay, but there's got to be other stuff too that she could call.
Sure.
Call the national hotline. I mean, it was just like, okay, I could have done that.
Sure. And that's understandable. Our warm line specialists, they're from all over the entire state of Michigan. So we might not have a resource from the area that you need. But what I think is cool, Matt, is it would be kind of neat as if you called us back and said, hey, I called a while ago and you didn't have a resource, but I found one. And here's one you can maybe utilize. And then we can add that to our resource list. So that would be neat too. But also we provide our resources based off of the 211 information or our own personal experience, or maybe asking a supervisor that's on, do you know of any resources for this in that area? Our resources are kind of like a living, breathing document. They change, just like everywhere else. But I would encourage you to, if you have an additional resource that you've learned since then, to call and give that feedback to a warm line specialist so that they can send that information out.
See, I didn't even know you guys had supervisors, because
Yeah.
I mean, it was my first time calling, so it was kind of new. I'm like I said, I'm a peer mentor, so I'm like, okay, I'm trying to help her as far as the training that I've gone through. Because we did talk about some crisis, mental health crisis type stuff in the mental health and peer mentor training. But it was kind of out of my realm a little bit, but
Okay.
I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do my best that I can. And I didn't want to like just leave her on the edge of
Yeah.
just
Well,
wondering
and
what to do.
I would always encourage you to let them know too, the warm line specialist that answers your call, that maybe it's something that like is not going to be helpful. Letting them know that I've already tried that resource. Do you have anything else? Or um letting them know that like how you're feeling about something, like if you're not like, I'm not feeling very good about our call right now, is there any way that you can help me out, like anything like that, to where maybe they can find an additional resource or consult with their own supervisor to see if there's some resources that they might not know about.
Mhm. So
And
Mary
I'm not
Beth,
trying to sound like I'm just bashing you guys. I'm really not.
Oh no, for sure. Yeah. Nope, I appreciate that feedback.
so Mary Beth, I was just gonna ask, what do you do if somebody calls that speaks a different language?
We do have an interpretation services available, and then that is one of the times where we will extend the 20-minute call times to be able to do that interpretation. So we do have that available for different languages or anything that we might need help with. We do have that service available, and again, we adjust the 20-minute call time for that.
Here's a question: as working with developmental disabilities, have you guys ever had anybody call in with TTY or like a human impairment through the what do they call that? The Michigan, where they do the video sign language and then they talk to you service yet?
I personally don't think we have, but that's a really great question. I appreciate you asking that. And I will, I know that we have that the translation services available, and I'm pretty sure that we use the same company for that, should we encounter that. But that's a great question, and I appreciate you asking that. I'll check into that. We have about 10 minutes left. Anybody else have any other questions? Is it 10 minutes? I'm not sure. Like,
We go until 11:30. And
oh, okay.
I was gonna ask Cynthia Brooks Jones if there's anything you want to share, because I think is she the only one that worked on the warm line, Mary Beth, or is there somebody else here that has?
I'm trying to see participants. I think Cynthia. Yep, Cynthia.
You don't have to, but I thought that maybe you could share what it was like for you personally to work the warm line and if there were benefits.
Okay, I absolutely loved working the warm line. When I did it with Jim Ho, I felt very honored. I felt that I was helping people just by being there to listen. I had people that would call and sometimes request me, we can't do that. We would tell them you got to take whatever person you had. But I had few difficult people, but I had a lot of people that also were very grateful and very kind. So it was helpful to me in a lot of ways. It was helpful to me also because helping others kind of, I don't know, it sort of helps you too in a way. That's the whole peer principle. I enjoyed it. If it hadn't switched to Common Ground when it did and the shift times changed, I probably would have continued. The only reason why I did not apply to continue was because the shift hours had changed. I really don't have a lot of negatives about it. It was like a good spot, and it was during the pandemic, and it really kind of kept me going and kept me busy. And I think it also helped people during that time too, because they were lonely, and some of the time we were in our houses, the majority of the time. So I even know today, even though we're out of that form of being like kind of in our houses, the pandemic's getting a little better. We got our vaccines, whatever, but it's still going. There's a lot of lonely people. And I think what came out of COVID was very positive, because there were people out there that weren't getting services, didn't have support, didn't have people to talk to. And now they're a phone call away, and they don't have to worry about finding a transportation way to get in somewhere all the time. And I don't know, I thought it was very beneficial.
Yeah, I always say that the pandemic is horrible. I don't see it going away fast, if ever, but some good things have came out of it. The only one I can think of right now is the Warmline. But we wouldn't, we definitely would not have a Warmline had it not been for the pandemic. And just to think about, there were a lot of people in the Upper Peninsula that were struggling to get services because of how rural it is, and the transportation that's very difficult in some of those rural areas. We worked with Brian Wellwood of Jimho to get the drop-ins, the ones that weren't open, but they had phone service to send people to the Warmline. And that worked quite a bit too. I think the one thing, Mary Beth, that we didn't mention is there was also this data collection piece. So University of Michigan helped us put together what are people calling for? And there were 3 parts of a call. It was, did they just call to talk to somebody, to just get some support and a listening ear? The other one was they called, like Matt said, they called for resources. And then the third area that we tracked were crisis calls, which were extremely low. Some weeks we never had one that needed to get transferred to the suicide hotline. So at that point, 988 was not in effect yet. So the transfers would go to the national line, whereas now Michigan individuals that are part of MyCal and Common Ground are answering the 988 calls. So that was really interesting. And then we also did some follow-ups with people who called the line, some of them very frequently. At the beginning, we said people could have, I think it was 3 or 4 calls.
At the beginning, it was 4, 1 per shift, I think, and we had 4 different shifts.
Because we knew people needed that outreach and support. But then when it transitioned to Common Ground, it ended up going back to what best practices are. And we had a lot of information that we collected from that data, and we had a lot of positive satisfaction surveys that came out of that. And Mary Beth was the one.
Okay, I do have another question now that you said that. Sorry. You said 2 per day. Is that 2 per day per person?
Yep, 2 calls per day per person, and it is from 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. is considered one of our days.
Okay,
So
now, let me ask you this question then, because like myself, what if I have a call in the morning, let's just say, and then I need to call again sometime in the afternoon because I have a different person that I'm working with, but then I'm calling a third time because I have a different person than the other 2. Then what happens? I'm just out of luck.
So you're calling for the person, you mean, or you're calling for yourself?
I'm calling to get resources or whatever for the other person.
Oh, well, I would encourage the person to call and get the resources.
I try
because
to
then they
sometimes.
get 2 calls, because we are only allowed to do 2 calls per person.
Okay.
And then I would suggest if you called a third time, we don't have like a phone number system or anything else that shows up, but we have a call counter, so it kind of comes in as like a 1, a 2, 3, whatever the number of calls that number has been, called in. We don't see that, but our system does, which keeps it anonymous. But so then we tell the caller, if that's the third call, we'll tell the caller, like, we don't just hang up, but we will, because we answer the calls. but we will tell the caller like, try 211, or here's a different like warm line number to call, or it might not be in the state of Michigan if that's what it need, more emotional support, or another organization. Maybe it's a community mental health agency that does have more resources. I'm not sure, but we do take that third call to the best of our ability to then give you an additional resource. But we don't keep the caller for 20 minutes because our call volume is so high.
I was just curious because, like I said, sometimes I try to get people to call on the best of my ability, but sometimes they don't always feel comfortable doing it. So that's why, I try to help where I can, but that's why I asked that question.
Yeah, it's a great question, though. I appreciate the questions. That's totally okay. The research that Pam was talking about, us being able to, I just wanted to make that clear too, because I know that I said we're completely anonymous. When callers would call in, and Cynthia was a part of that too, is when callers would call in, we would ask their permission to do a quality improvement questionnaire survey with the callers, and then get their permission to call them back in a time of day to call them back with like their name, first name, or something like that, if they wanted to release that information. And then we would call them, ask them some questions that we were collecting data on, and then go from there. But they were the ones that gave that permission. We didn't just call people that were, hey, saw you called the warm line. Let me ask you a couple questions. So it was a part of a quality improvement plan that they were, all of our callers were welcomed to be a part of. We did it by different shifts. So if they were calling from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., we would tell that during one day, we would tell that shift to ask all their callers. Then it might be a different time limit for the next day or whatever. And so that way we had a good collection of callers to be able to call and collect data from.
So Mary Beth, when's the busiest times?
First thing in the morning, 10 a.m. And then there's no rhyme or reason really of when the calls come in. We can, the beginning of the day, we if it's 10 o'clock in the morning, between 10 and probably I would say noon, we are back to back calls. And then we have been getting more consistently busy in the evening as well. So in the later hours, so like from midnight to 2 a.m. The later calls, because we are one of the only warm lines that are open that late. So I mean, if we give you a national number and they're open 24/7, that's a really cool resource. But sometimes, if you look for other, that warmlines.org that Pam showed in the beginning of our presentation, they might take calls from outside of Michigan, but they might not be open during the time that you're, needing assistance. So, yeah, we are one of the states that operate into an early morning of 2 a.m. hour.
And many of them are closed on holidays.
Yes, and yep,
So-
and weekends even.
Mhm.
Yep.
Now, the other thing that I wanted to mention, and Mary Beth, you were the lead on this, was at the very beginning when people couldn't get out and there was those strict executive orders. Can you talk about the group that we developed where people who were repeat callers could just join and work together?
It's one of my favorite things to talk about. I still talk about it to this day. The group is no longer active because they're doing so well. But in the beginning, we saw the need for those callers that were calling 3, 4, 5 times a day, that just really had no emotional support, might have been just like totally stuck at home. And we had callers from all different walks of life. So callers that were like, they couldn't drive and the bus transportation was shut down. They were in a senior living place or maybe a nursing home and their family couldn't come visit them. So we developed a over the phone support group that was twice a week, one time during the day hours, and then the morning hours, and then the second time that week would be in the evening hours. And we had quite a few frequent callers join that group. It was offered to anybody who had that limited support system, and couldn't get out of the house or couldn't, just were just kind of like stuck by themselves with that limited support, to call. And that went on for over 2 years, and now it's kind of neat to see how the growth has happened, because those callers then basically started on ventures. They started like, I really appreciate this. It's really helped a lot. We did different topics, and to the point where now they're like, we don't need this. And so the group did dissolve, but it was because of their recovery stories and how they used to call so many times per day. And then they were calling group twice a week plus the 2 calls. And then they just said, you know what? We're doing good. And they would provide resources and support to each other over the phone, which was kind of neat. They linked together. They did a couple of things. They provided each other so much support that they just felt like, hey, we're good, And they do call the warm line, but some of the callers that were calling into the group, that they no longer even call the warm line. So, I mean, it's been a tremendous, like, awesome journey to watch. And I love talking about that, because to see the growth in those specific callers has just been astounding.
Well, that's great to hear, and I like to hear that.
Now, are there any other questions or comments or discussion as we're winding down? What are the shifts do the peer supports work, Mary Beth? That's a question coming through our chat.
So we have various different shifts available. We have a staffing pattern sheet. We have that one's a very difficult. So it's basically there are 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. shifts available. There's 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. There's 4 p.m. to midnight. There's 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. There's weekend shifts that are just part-time. It's every, we have some people that work every other weekend, rotating weekends. So it really varies. It really varies according to the position that they were hired for. And what was that other
How
question?
much do we get paid as a warm line peer? That's okay, Katie, that you came in late. You were probably surfing other workshops, and I'm going to admit I might be doing that the next couple days too.
So I think that we are very generously paid. It is between I believe 18 and 21, I want to say, dollars an hour. And it is based on what hours of what are your hours of employment. We offer different things like shift differentials for people that work like midnights, that kind of stuff. But it's different. It is different. And then, is it draining? That's a hard to answer. I don't think it's draining. I would say that some of the calls can be unsettling, but that is why we are very honored and to have peer warmline supervisors be able to debrief after hard calls or at the end of your shift to make sure that like you're okay. Because our peer warm, I mean, our callers are important. Don't get us wrong. That's our primary focus. But our warmline specialists, we also make sure that they're getting the support that they need as well to debrief and make sure that they're at their best to take the next call that comes in. So I'm not going to lie and say some of our calls are not unsettling. I wouldn't per se use the word draining, but I think that means different for every person.
Now, where are the positions located is another question.
Okay, I missed that one. So we are remote based out of our own home. And so you have to be a certified MDHHS certified peer support specialist, or duly certified as a recovery coach, and you work from home, but all over the state of Michigan. So we are, there's not really they have to be a Michigan resident at all times. You can't be out of the state of Michigan taking calls. And then how do you apply? Common Ground has a website, commongroundhelps.org. And they there's a place at the top that says employment opportunities, I believe, and that is the place that you can apply it if you're interested in that. Do you miss in-person work? That's a good question. Yes and no. Part of my recovery journey is now, like my current recovery journey is being able to be at home. And so, yes, I do miss a lot of the interactions, but I'm still getting the same interactions and the same growth and empowerment of my own recovery from helping other people. So I think that there's a lot of benefits to being able to work from home, but I mean, I miss the interaction, sure. Yeah, but we do a lot of Zoom meetings and stuff like we're doing here. We use Microsoft Teams, so we do that quite a bit. It's like we're in person. And are there any benefits that come with this position? Like benefits?
Like paid time off,
Oh,
vacation,
yeah.
anything like that.
We have a very generous benefit package actually for I couldn't tell you the exact like total amounts, all that kind of stuff, but they give us a certain amount of paid time off days, sick days. We have a generous attendance policy also that provides us with, according to how many hours you are hired at. 0.4 is like a weekend, like a 16-hour a week position, all the way up to a 1.0, which is full-time 40 hours a week. So it's really based off of your point status on how much you earn and all that. But the attendance policy is very generous when I say that. So we have a certain amount of allowances of call-ins and tardies, that kind of thing. And as a peer that has worked for, a couple of different agencies in the last 20 some years, showing my age there, they have been one of the best when it comes to benefit packages and attendance and punctuality policies. Over the phone, it says, do you find it harder over the phone versus in person? Over the phone, you can't see a person's facial features, their reactions, you have to listen for different things. And that's what our peer warmline specialists and supervisors are trained in with regards to like tone of voice, words. It might be a situation that's going on, quietness in between one thing that they're telling you versus another thing, or how their voice changes. So it is a little bit harder at times, but other times I think it's extremely, rewarding and not easier. I wouldn't say easier, but it can be just the same. The only difference is you're not person like face to face. So we do listen for the tone of voice and different things that the caller might be saying. So there's a lot of training that goes on, a lot. And we continue to have a lot of good trainings to brush up on skills as reminders, a lot of good conversations going on to make it less hard to do our jobs as peers over the phone versus in person. Do you get tired of being in the phone? And in a nutshell, what'd you talk about here? Last question. I don't see anybody that gets tired of being on the phone. I think that they have a passion for it because they think it's from what I've heard, I'm kind of speculating, but this is what I heard is from my warmline responders and supervisors, is that they think that it's kind of neat that they can provide an additional resource over the phone to somebody who might need just that support right now versus having to wait to get in to see somebody for an appointment. And in a nutshell, what we talk about is just the Warmline in general, Michigan Warmline, how it's staffed, hours of operations, what kind of calls we take, and that we provide emotional support and are connected to a crisis line. So we have that resource available too for those tougher calls that do come in that need additional assistance. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys attending. You know, like Pam said, oh wait, how long do peers work for the warm line? Well, let me go backwards. I've seen a couple. Hang on. Your ability to act and
It's
form a
Barb
group.
Murphy just gave a very
Okay.
nice comment.
Act and form a group during COVID was impressive. Good call and great support. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mo. And how long do peers work for the warm line? So we've had peers that have been with us since the beginning of the warm line with Justice and Mental Health Organization since the initiation of it. And then we have some fairly new peers, but we really don't have like I don't have like an answer to that question really about how long. It's based on how long they want to work for the warm line, I guess.
Mhm.
We have
I
a
just
very low turnover rate. If that answers your question, it's very low.
I just want to say thank you. There was a lot of information today, and I really needed this, so I really appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. And thank you for your great questions.
Yes, thank you, everyone,
you.
and have fun on your break. And the next ones start at 11:45.
Yes. All right. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you for attending.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.